You're listening to Partnernomics Podcast, where we discuss the art and science of developing successful strategic partnerships. To learn more about the suite of Partnernomics solutions, visit partnernomics.com.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Partnernomics Podcast. This is Mark Brigman. I've got my sidekick, Mr. Tyler Pittman, with me as usual. What's going on, Tyler?
How you doing?
How do you, Matt? So we have a guest with us today that hopefully, if we don't run him off, we'll have him back. But Mr. Tom Wisnasky. Tom, what's going on, buddy?
How you doing, Mark?
Good, doing good.
Good to see you.
Hey, so we thought that on a previous podcast we had talked about brewing beer, and we've got an IPA that we're going to be brewing sometime over the next couple weeks. But we were describing the beer that we did probably 2 months ago. And so we know that you love some craft beer. And so we're going to have you test.
Okay.
We're going to have you try our beer and give us, I mean, we're all about being candid, transparent, authentic, all those kind of cool words that we use here for Partnernomics. We want you to give us an authentic review of the beer. So
Okay.
it's the glass with just a little bit of beer in it.
Okay, this one here.
Yep.
Okay.
Boy, you're getting all ready. I'm nervous now. I feel like it's like final exam day.
She's got a good smell.
Oh, you're smelling it and everything.
Yeah.
I'm getting the true review.
Good temperature.
We have a really cold fridge.
Ooh, man. That's smooth.
Yeah.
That is smooth.
No, you
yeah.
can be real.
That is really smooth. I got a little orangey taste in there. Is there some orange in there?
Well, that was an Imperial Blonde, right?
I think so.
Yeah, an Imperial Blonde. Yeah, so it probably has a little bit of some fruit hints to it.
Yeah.
So after that last sip right there, I get it down and my mouth just exploded with the juices. So that's a good thing, right? So this is an IPA, right?
It's like a farmhouse ale.
A farmhouse ale.
Yep.
And I don't know the difference. You said I'm getting into the craft beers. I'm being...
You still have training wheels?
Absolutely, man. I'm riding my
Getting your
green
feet wet.
machine still.
You gotta start
But
somewhere.
I'll get on that green machine every day if you need me to be a tester. But no, so a farmhouse ale versus an IPA. Don't know the difference.
Lower hops.
Lower hops. Okay, so that explains it. That was going to be my first comment after taking the first sip and maybe expecting to be that hoppier grab, which, by the way, I will err on the side of honesty of I'm not really a big hoppy guy.
Right.
So I was expecting to get that pop from a hop.
I like that.
To pop from the hop, but I didn't. And then it's, a beer to me that sits there as it's been poured for a while. It's still got some bubbly going. It's well carbonated.
Right.
It doesn't hit the back of my throat like I can't breathe.
And you're getting all
Carbonated.
technical here.
But no, it's got a really good taste. This is a beer that, like last night when I was with a buddy, we had a beer that was a stout that you drink one of them and you move on to something different. It's not like you're going to go in. I mean, and you sip it, you enjoy it. This on a hot summer day, I could enjoy 3, 4, 5
Couple
of
of
them and around a pool playing some volleyball.
There we go.
Speaking of pool, you got a pool in your backyard, right?
Yeah.
When's that invite coming, man?
No, it's always open. Always school's always open. But yeah, that's been an interesting understanding how to first time pool owner. I wasn't quite sure what I was getting in and you know the value of partnerships and relationships. Man, I have been asking all my buddies that own pools like, hey man, where do you get your chemicals? Where do you get this? And how do you manage the chlorine balance and the alkalinity and the pH? And it's, the way my mind operates a bit, I would probably want to treat it like a chemistry experiment back in high school where I would get everything down to the molecular level. And my buddy's like, man, on an occasion basis, once a week, shock it with some chlorine, you'll be all right.
As long as it's not turning green and oozy when you jump in. And
And I'm like,
you're
so
all
I'm overthinking this. He's like, yeah. You are. Okay, man. So, yeah, it's good. So let's get back to this beer because I'm kind of.
Well, you're going to have to commit this taste to memory because we're going to bust out another one here in the next week or two, and we want you to do a little comparison.
You guys brewed this.
Yeah.
Man, I'm
It's not that hard.
impressed.
If you can make tea, you can make beer, right, Tyler?
That's right.
Really? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Not near as bad as I thought.
Really?
Yeah.
So, see, I had it in my mind that it was well, of course, obviously, anytime you're, I guess, making any product, you want to keep it a clean environment. It's clean and sterile environment. Because I have heard from other guys that I've worked with, if you're not working with sterile equipment, you can kill a batch real quick.
Oh, no question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the yeast specifically is really, really sensitive to that.
Mm-hmm.
So what does the yeast do? The yeast consumes, or the yeast is the fuel?
Kind of both-ish. The
Okay.
yeast consumes the sugar, and the byproduct is
alcohol.
and carbon dioxide.
Okay. So is it safe to assume if I add more yeast to a batch, I could drive the alcohol content up?
As long as there's sugars for it to eat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So that's how you can get those 12s, 13s, 14 percenters that really get you going. All right, so Tom, we want to talk about relationships for this podcast. But what I would like to start off with is tell us a little bit about Tom Wisnasky so that we have a better understanding of just kind of the context that you're bringing in. Just quickly about your career and what path have you taken? And then what are you doing? What are you doing now?
Okay. So from a, I guess, schooling perspective, took a little bit of a non-traditional path, a very non-traditional path. Started off as an engineering student, then went into kind of a hybrid engineering, geology, geography, and GIS program, and then went on and got another degree in telecommunications management. Now, that telecommunications management degree was driven by the fact that I had a really good mentor, Bob Townsend, that showed me this cool thing called telecommunications and technology. So I decided, hey, if I'm going to stay in this business or in this industry, I'm going to go get some credentials that back the story. So I got involved really out of the gate on the technical side of knowing, tip and ring, red and green wire, 48 volt DC current was the ringtone, and that's why a phone rang. And okay, all these wires make all these things happen, and your voice gets translated in from this sine wave and decoded on the other end, and hey, that's how we talk. That was the original start of it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm wrapping my mind around all this technology and I'm digging it, right? And like I said, the power of that relationship with Bob acting as my mentor was really cool to get me started. And then after that, I went to work for a carrier, Sprint, one that you worked for.
Yep.
I was there for about 2 years, and then I went to work for a reseller of the Sprint core products. Worked there for a couple years, and then went over to another carrier, AT&T, and at this time had not gotten involved on the wireless business at all. Was still just doing traditional wireline, and my expertise had started to evolve into data networks and connectivity and companies that have multiple offices, either in a metropolitan area or regionally or even globally. I remember at AT&T, I was the first guy to do a fractional DS3, which I could dork out and tell you what all that meant on the number of channels and T1s and blah, 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 across the pond. So I learned about this thing called the transoceanic cable, fiber optic cable that these, and it's blowing my mind that these cables live in the sea, right? And that's how the communications go from, the POP or the point of presence in New York or down in, South Carolina somewhere and traverse
Converted
across
light
the
signals
ocean.
and launched across the big pond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started, I was lucky to run into those things. And then I got progressing in my path. I went to work for the software side of the business. And HP at the time had this really cool product called HP OpenView, where you could look at a screen or a multitude of screens in a NOC, called a Network Operations Center, and you could see all the health status of all these connectivity from A to Z and all the routes they took, and man, all the blinking lights. And I was like, dude, this stuff is cool. So you can get all this information. You can write reports about this. And now I can go tell someone who has to make decisions about this, hey, this is the health and here, and maybe we need to invest something here because we need to have better performance there. That was cool. So I got bit by the software bug. And actually I've been in the software side of the business since, and found, worked for a couple of companies where I've been the operational support systems, OSS, and then the BSS, the business support systems, which generally includes the billing side. How do people that activate a service on a network then go collect revenue against that service and measure the usage that happens on the network that equates to a rate that then drives a bill for what you consumed on my network that I've gone out and built. And been doing that now for the last 12 years since I found the software side. And so currently today, just to kind of round out, and I'll back up. So I started off in sales, or excuse me, my first run was engineering and setting up, literally pulling cables to set up the connectivity piece. And then engineering and field operations, I called it. And then I got in sales, and I was in sales for about 10 years. Sales biz dev, I'll call it, where you're creating relationships and you're marketing products for companies and talking about what's on the roadmap, because this is the next generation of what we're putting our R&D dollars into. And I quickly found out that was something I enjoyed, but it wasn't who I was. For me, I got to really believe in what the stories that I'm telling. And sometimes, too many times on the sales side of things, I found myself having to communicate things that I wasn't 100% behind. So I said, hey, let's get over on the technical side. And I became an architect. So putting together all the pieces of the puzzle and on that OSS and BSS side of the spectrum, these are multi-million-dollar support contracts that companies like Sprint and AT&T and, dude, you even were a part of the largest service contract in history back when Ericsson and Sprint crafted that 7-year or 5-year.
Yeah. 7-year, $5 billion.
$5 billion.
Yeah. It involves 6,000 employees.
Crazy, right? So this is it. Getting on the software side, it kind of opened my spectrum of, whoa, this is the space I'm playing in, and it's really big. Yeah. So coming, fast forwarding and kind of telling you, being on the architecture side, I've been just really lucky to work with some really smart developers from all over the world. I've worked with developers in Brazil, India, Australia, Mexico, the UK, Russia.
So you're with an international company now.
Yes.
I mean, we were talking, gosh, I don't know. Well, you spent a long time in Australia recently.
4 months. Yeah, 4 months in 2019. Wow. Yeah, it was, man, I tell you, it was interesting to be away from home for that time period, but you got to embrace what it's giving you. And I tell you, the culture there, the people were awesome. I mean, I'm working, for Telstra. It's a tier 1, meaning it's, they've got the network and the subscriber volume to put them as a high-ranking tier 1 global operator. And I had people that I was working with on the project. They're like, hey, mate, what are you doing this weekend? Why don't you go on a hike with us and come hang out in the house, and we'll make you some good, authentic Australian food. And
was it kangaroos, or what do they eat?
No, I tell you, gosh, I got to stop and remember the name of the spread. That's kind of like a peanut butter spread. It's a dark brown in color. It'll come to me later on in here, but
it's not Nutella, right?
No,
it's like some
it'll
authentic local stuff.
It is, and it's kind of like, hey, I was, as a kid, peanut butter and jelly was a staple in my lunchbox.
Right on.
And this is like the peanut butter to Australians.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I was over at one of the gal I worked with. She goes, hey, come on out and check out my boutique. I got a shop down in this town, and I'm introducing my girls and just kind of show you around suburbia, Melbourne, Australia. And anyhow, it was awesome. But I will tell you, she put this spread on some toast for me, and I took one bite. And I
you ain't been the same since?
I'm like, dude, that's an acquired taste. I don't know if I can go down that path.
It's kind of like some hoppy beer.
Very much
acquired
so.
taste,
Very much
right?
so. But anyhow, so to kind of wrap up, and I have a tendency to be lengthy in my chatter. So to wrap up where that progression in my career path has taken me today, I just wrapped up being an architect, and I've moved into kind of a program management role where it's all about people. Yeah. So the backstory or the history I've been lucky to experience in understanding the technology puts me in a good position to understand what the smart people are talking about, but I'm in a better position now to mentor those people from a business standpoint, so that when we enter into these multi-million-dollar arrangements, there's business requirements that are driving the need for the technology, and you have at the center of that is keeping all the people of this team driven towards those same set of requirements, because in the end, you got a customer you got to keep happy because they're spending money.
Yeah.
So that's that's the progression.
Yeah, man. So I always enjoy our conversations, right? And so we've known each other. We were just talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
We've known each other for
8
years,
8+ years, yeah.
somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And then whenever we were launching PARTNERNOMICS 4 years ago in earnest, you were one of the first people that reviewed some of the content, the curriculum coming through the courses. So you're very familiar with our content, having finished the courses and stuff. But I've always admired just, you're talking about communications and just perspective, relationships, all of those things that are really core to what PARTNERNOMICS is and what it stands for and what we believe. And so that's why we're interested in having you join us, on the podcast, just to provide an additional perspective.
Yeah.
And you shot something over to us about relationships and the value of relationships and what that means. And I think just in our fast-paced transactional society, man, sometimes we don't slow down enough to really think about
Agreed.
relationships and building those relationships. Man, it's at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody threw out something on LinkedIn yesterday, and it was from Warren Buffett. And it said, Warren Buffett basically has pulled everything down to one word.
Yeah. Love.
And that's love.
Yeah. I read
like
it.
at the end of the
that's
day.
so simple, but so powerful.
One word.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is so telling.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, that's a man that's doing it right in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And a guy that could do it in a lot of wrong ways. You look at somebody that's amassed the net wealth that he has, and I tell you what, the Oracle from Omaha is what he's known as, right? And what really drew me into that guy was when I realized he had made a statement, and it wasn't in disrespect, but he said, when I pass, when I leave on, I want to leave my legacy of love and the relationships with people, super important to him. All the money that I have, I would rather it go to helping others. He is a huge donator. The largest donator to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
And it's not a number in that begins with the letter M. It begins with the letter B.
Yeah.
Billion.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And if you read about what Bill and Melinda are doing out globally, and working on these ways to provide clean water to people and sustainable agriculture so these people can eat. Those are core. I mean, that's how the progression of humanity continues. And I mean, not to get philosophical, but that's a guy that spent, Bill spent his whole, life as a technologist and running Microsoft, and the billions that he has amassed. And just, those are people that I like to be.
Warren was like the first
by.
one that challenged all these different billionaires to give away at least $1 billion each.
Right.
And he's asking, who's in it.
Yeah.
But it was him. He was the leader of that. And man, that's to be worth so much money, to be known about money, but he's like, it's not about money.
So you look at the city of Omaha, you look at the car the guy drives, the house he still lives in. I mean, it's simple. It's simple pleasure that he. But you look at how he has driven the growth of the city of Omaha. People want to move there just to be associated with a company that he might be backing or behind.
It reminds me a lot of like Sam Walton.
Yeah.
Some of the stories about
Yeah.
Sam Walton. I mean, the guy was cruising around in some beat up old pickup truck, and you would just never know that the guy was worth, how many billions and billions of dollars, but just a pretty simple but very intelligent and forward-thinking man.
So I love going in, and this just popped into my head. And before I tell this story, is this one that I have to give feedback on?
Yeah, so that's the mix. So
Okay.
so Thomas just grabbed the second beer, and
Okay.
so what
To mix with what?
it is
Our
a
homebrew mixed with this IPA.
Okay, that's the Hoppin' Nomad.
Hopping Nomad. Yep.
Okay, so this is the homebrew that I just had
Yeah.
Correct.
mixed with that.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so we're
Yeah, so
ready to
what-
give some feedback here.
Yeah, so we were thinking that our homebrew was a little bland, a little boring, a little too smoothish.
Okay.
And so we thought we
depending
needed
upon
some.
whose palate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
For somebody
we like
with
the
training
hoppy.
wheels like yourself, it's probably pretty solid. It's probably pretty good. But for
Yes.
a more advanced, more sophisticated palate like Tyler's and mine, you gotta throw in some
Yeah.
pop and some fizz.
I'm the elementary school kid, man.
Yeah.
You dudes are in high school just figuring out things. You
We're
guys might even
varsity,
be-
baby. We're
yeah,
varsity.
heck yeah. All right, let's go. Let's check this out. We have a name for this, by the way.
No.
No,
The Hoppy Hybrid. Okay, we'll call it the Hoppy Hybrid.
Hey, man, you're on
I
something.
like that.
Isn't that crazy? All the weird names they come up with for beers.
Insane.
Yeah. Hey,
Okay.
let's share our new favorite.
Oh, the puppies with lasers.
Puppies with
Puppies
lasers.
with
Grains and
lasers.
taps.
Grains and taps and Lee
Ooh,
Summit. Little
love that.
Yep.
little love to those guys.
Good
All right, so
stuff.
here's the feedback. That it definitely brings the hop level
Yeah.
up to the next level, but it's not too much.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, for this training wheel, dude, it's not too much. It wouldn't turn me off to want to just have one.
Right.
Right.
I'd go back for another.
Right.
From a taste or a palate standpoint, that's the first thing I noticed difference is just the hoppy.
Hops.
Now, obviously that's got its own taste to it. That's got its own taste to it. But the two mixed together, I wouldn't call it a black and tan.
Right. It's very different.
Very,
yeah.
very different
very different mix
Yeah,
than that bad boy. So I would love for you to talk about. I'm going to make you pick one
Okay.
mentor. Think about your life, your career. If you could only pick one person that has been the most influential for your life.
Now,
Who-
from a business perspective,
Man, I don't. We were chatting about this earlier before we flipped on the recorder, but I don't think I agree with you. The statement you made. There's no line. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're one person. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't flip on a hat or flip on a suit and you become a different person when you walk in the business world or when you walk in the office. It's the same, right? I mean, we're becoming the person that we are.
Yep.
And it's whether it's personal, it's professional, it's us. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's different.
So I 100% agree with you. And the first thought that comes to my mind is it's a bit of a hybrid of two people.
So you're not going to give me one.
I can.
No.
I
You're
can. But there's two
I
people.
couldn't do it either. I would have to give you at least 2, 3, 4.
There's two people, and I'll mention their names after I mention the why or the what they've given me. One guy has really kept me centered on who I am, my brand, the message that I'm good at delivering because it's who I am as a person, on and off the field, I'll call it, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other guy is a similar type A go-getter personality that if I call him, he's on the West Coast, so if it's midnight and I call him at 10 p.m., he's going to answer and be like, hey, Tommy, what's up? You got a question? Everything okay? But he's the guy that, took me down to Johnson Space Center, and that's in Houston, right? Where they I think it's the museum where they have the space shuttle, and actually I might be goofing that up, but anyhow, he's the guy that said, hey, you know what? We were working this trade show. We're grinding. We're standing on the floor for 12 hours. You're talking all day business. Tomorrow, let's take the half day and just go down here and look at some cool stuff on how we've discovered other things in outer space. And you see this whole history of rocket. So that guy is the fun-loving dude. Wake up in the morning, do some push-ups, go for a couple mile jog, and just live life with zest. And that guy's Michael Crane. He's by far been just a good compass for energy and stay on the front of the plow if that's what drives you. And then Jeff Edlund is a guy that is authenticity for sure. You know, Jeff is a strong rooted Christian man. And that drives him in all facets of his day, whether it be personal or business. Once again, you know, not having a dual role personality. He is who he is. But Jeff has really helped bring me to what I would call that graduate level of personality in the business world, where you don't have to fight for who you want to be. You're already who you are. Communicate it and have impact with those around you, and mentor that you might, you know, those that were young like you one day that met a guy like him. So it's those two.
Yeah, I've had a chance to chat with Jeff, and man, it's so easy to just sit down with him, and in a few minutes, man, you feel like you've known him forever. But he's one of those people where, in just a couple minutes into the conversation, he makes you feel so at ease. He makes you
very
feel like
yes.
he's there for you.
Yep.
And man, there's an art to that, but there's also some authenticity to that.
Yep.
He knows that he has an opportunity to kind of pass on some legacy.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's funny you even mentioned that, because that's something he's been talking to me about a lot lately. He's I can share this publicly because he's talked about, hey, you know, and I, once again, as the guy that mentors me, I think about how I would want to pave this path, but he's thinking about retirement, right? And those are things that you got to start thinking about. Hey, it's not like, hey, next week I'm going to call it quits. You know, he's on a 5-year trajectory, and he's not looking at how it's going to affect him. He's already planned for it in the right way. He's looking at, who do I want to surround myself with that I can pass on my knowledge, so that when it's like a relay race.
Yeah. Like the baton, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
Keep it going.
Correct. So he's been talking to me, like he'll just randomly call me, like, hey, you want to go up to Barriga's? And give a little plug for Barriga's over in Greenwood, great Mexican restaurant. He's like, yeah, let's go over to our hot spot and have some, you know, like for you and I, it's Ginger Sue's. That's our hot spot where we have breakfast. But our hot spot, Jeff and I, is a Barriga's. He's like, hey, let's go hang out and let's just catch up. How's life, you know, treating you? And he starting to talk to me in that, and then not to get in a weird way, but it's almost like a fatherly mentor role where, you know, he's not that much older than me, but he's so much wiser than me because of what he's experienced. Yeah. And I'm just so lucky to have guys like that, you know, would bring me under their wing and help guide me along. Because, man, the path you take in life can really sometimes take left turns, right turns,
and
left
one
hooks.
person can make that happen
Yes.
for you, right?
Yeah.
A good or bad.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Good or bad.
Yeah.
I've had a little bit of both. I've had times where, you know, been laid off, you know, RIFs, a reduction in force, and you're like, man, what did I do wrong? Well, it wasn't anything you did wrong. It's what the organization wasn't able to deliver. You know, if you're a publicly traded company, the next thing you know, you're working for a company that has 80,000 employees globally, and your organization you're cutting 2,000 employees, and you're one of them.
Yeah.
I took that was tough. I took that personal at first. I'm like, gosh dang it, what did I do wrong? And then in the end, Jeff was the guy who was like, hey, it was nothing you did. This is a numbers game, man. It's a numbers game.
Man, this is a fascinating topic. I'm going to ask you to stick around. Let's go ahead and fire up another podcast. We're gonna hit this with a part 2 so we can finish this conversation up. Well, thanks again for tuning in to this episode of Partnernomics Podcast. We will see you next time.
Partnernomics Podcast is brought to you by Partnernomics. Learn how to leverage the power of partnership. To listen to more episodes of Partnernomics Podcast, visit partnernomics.com.